Hello, Angetsu. I can't hear you.
Hear me?
Now I can.
Now I found out that this doesn't work. It works with Zoom and other things, but when it's Instagram, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't think it works.
Okay, but now can you hear me well?
Perfectly well.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation for this Zencounter. And thanks everyone who is coming to listen to us and to the Dharma. So I want to start introducing myself and then where kind of we met, and then I send the ball to you, and then we can play some football, some Zen football here.
Excellent.
So my name is Engetsu Carol. In Brazil it's Carol, but in the United States usually people just say Carolina. But in Brazil people call me Carol. And Engetsu is my Dharma name that I received in Brazil. I started my practice in Brazil in 2006. And in 2013, I started traveling and visiting Zen centers. And in 2014, I was living at City Center, the Zen Center in the city of San Francisco Zen Center. And me and Rosen, that was, by the time he was just Diego, we were working together in the kitchen. And then after that, many things have happened in both of our lives. But then I have come back and forth from the United States, from Brazil to the United States, and I've lived at the Sahara, that is a Zen center, a Zen mountain center in the mountains south of San Francisco, that Diego also lived there. And we had many things in common in our biography, Diego, right?
We do.
Yeah, and we both have been the Ino, who is the head of the meditation hall, or the person who is in charge of kind of being in the meditation hall and organize retreats and ceremonies. And then last year I came back to Brazil for 3 months, and suddenly the pandemic started, so I'm here. I couldn't go back. And Diego is there in San Francisco, and now he's actually the president of San Francisco Zen Center. So Diego, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we can go from there.
Thank you, Getsu. So as you described just now, I did my first practice period at City Center in the city of San Francisco on 2014. That's where we met, right, in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yes.
what you were telling, this beautiful story. Actually, my first time at San Francisco Zen Center was on 2013 because I came here for my honeymoon. So I was working in Mexico City with my advertising company then. We decided with Paula, with my wife, to come to San Francisco and West Coast for a honeymoon. So I came to check San Francisco Zen Center out because I had been practicing Zen for almost a decade before this, but in another lineage, the Deshimaru lineage, a different lineage. So that's how I came here for the first time in 2013. Then I started coming back and forth. Every time I went to Mexico City, I hopped on a plane, came to San Francisco, went back. And then we met. You and I met in the kitchen, working in the kitchen, cutting yes. Carrots and cutting onions.
Yeah, and cucumbers.
With Mary Stairs as the Tenzo, as the head of the kitchen. And then after that, I actually left San Francisco Zen Center for some months because I traveled to Japan. And I went to Japan for 6 months, where I deepened my studies of tea and Zen, mostly in Kyoto. Then to come back to San Francisco Zen Center, and mostly directly to Tasahara, to the monastery you were telling about, to Tasahara Mountain Center. So where I stayed until 2017, when I came back to the city of San Francisco, where I live now. And as you say, my place in the mandala right now is being the president here.
And Diego, I know that before you had this advertising company, so you're kind of businessman and a lot of responsibilities in this kind of marketing world. And how, I don't know, how could you describe how was your relationship with work before and how Zen may have changed it, or how, yeah, how is for you the connection between Zen and work, how it works for you?
You know, there is an analogy that I like very much, and I've heard it from other people as well, which describes Zen practice, or maybe spiritual practice, not so much as a book on a bookshelf, but more as the spiritual practice or Zen practice being the bookshelf itself, right? And that's a big difference, or that's a big I think it's important because work is part of one's life. Hopefully it's a book on one's shelf. If work it's your shelf, I think you might be in some trouble. But when book is part of your when work is part of your life, it's a book on your shelf. Then when your spiritual practice is the shelf itself, it contains your work, right? There's no difference between your spiritual practice and your work. But when spiritual practice is understood as another book on your shelf, then you read a book at a time, right? And they say, well, now I'm reading this book, which is my work. Now I'm reading this book, which is my practice and my spiritual practice, or my deepening of the self. And that's where it gets very difficult, because it's very difficult to read two books at the same time, right? And especially simultaneously. And that was something that changed in my understanding while I was working with my advertising company and while I was practicing Zen in Argentina and in Spain. That suddenly there was no difference. It wasn't one thing and the other that I attended at different times, but it became one thing in the other, right? Zen practice was in my work and not something I did differently. So when that happens, then everything you do is practice, right? And Dogen was a founder of the Soto Zen lineage, the lineage that you and I are in, just for people to understand the school of Zen that we're in, who was born in the year 1200. And he said that the practice didn't start when we sat in meditation, neither it ended when we stood up, when we stand from our safu, from our cushion, right? And that's really important, because then we can understand work as practice. Because family relationships are practice, because art is practice, because work is practice. When practice is the bookshelf itself and not another book in your shelf. And that was very transformative, and it really transformed my work. At some point there was some difficulty for me in the some things that I was doing, or the way that I was doing some of my work, because it started being not too consistent with the way I understood I wanted to live my life, right? And I have nothing against advertising. I still love advertising, and actually we do advertising at San Francisco Zencounter. But there were some things that I was doing that started making a bit of noise, right? I got very good at convincing you that you needed your 10th pair of Havaianas, right? And maybe a couple of pairs of Havaianas is good enough, right? So that was, or not, or maybe we need 10, right? But the thing is, my job became too much about communicating things in a way that I wasn't too convinced anymore in regards to the impact on yourself, the impact on the world, and whatnot. So it did transform the way I communicated things. It did transform the way the things I chose to communicate, right? So there was a transformation. It did change deeply the way I related to other people, not just people who worked in the team, but also people who are clients, our suppliers, wisdom can be there present. Sometimes we think about work being too very much cutthroat, and yeah, I have to really destroy my competition, or in this deal I have to come up with all the earnings, and I feel great because I'm the winner, you're the loser. And then something started to shift there in ways where can we actually both end up with something that's valuable for us from this deal, So starting to think work in another way. And then after years of thinking that way and seeing that way transformed my life, I decided that I wanted to deepen my understanding of this practice in a way that I couldn't really do while working. And not because the only way to deepen your practice is by being a monk, like I am now in a monastery. But basically, if you want to prepare yourself to really give back, offer something as practice to people who are engaged in regular jobs, in regular work, my feeling was I need to stop and train. Then I could go back. Then I can start, bringing this practice closer in a way that's accessible to people who have 9 to 5 jobs or 6 to 12 jobs or whatever. People work a lot. But I felt that I need to be prepared. That the most of many of the teachers or guides that I interacted with, because of accessibility, because in Latin America we don't have so much of this and whatnot, I felt there was a lack of preparation. And I always like to say this, 10 years of therapy do not convert you into a psychologist. Right?
Yes.
So I said, well, I need to go and study, actually. Stop and study. And that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years, right? But now I'm engaging in Zencounter as a president, and I'm actually using every tool and everything I learned in that moment of my life back, I think in a very wholesome way, in leading this particular institution in this way, right? So it's a beautiful process, and I want to be very clear in this. You don't need to be a monk in a monastery, unless you want to be a psychologist, right? That's a different thing, right?
But maybe for the psychologist, you need to be to the psychology school. I mean, it's good if you sit some zazen too, but
exactly. So I'm not saying a psychologist doesn't need to do therapy, of course.
Yeah.
But what's your preparation, right? What do you want to offer?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the story, right?
And what would you say to people who are actually now in their works kind of dealing with stress, and especially now with quarantine, and with pandemic, so many people like working at home. For some people, it's actually great to be at home, but sometimes having to deal with work and kids and all the stress of that we have to deal in the regular jobs. What did you say for them? How to practice with that?
My advice would be, do one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that, and I see myself in working at, home with other distractions, and even in having a Zoom meeting, and suddenly I catch myself checking an email during a Zoom meeting, not related to the Zoom meeting. So what am I doing here? Or paying attention to other things, or maybe we might have the TV on, or what have you. Having in this particular situation where we are so involved in the entirety of our lives in such a small space, I feel there's a tendency of multitasking, and not in a good way. So do one thing at a time, mm-hmm. right? Pay complete attention to the present moment, to what you're doing right now, and then do the next thing. And mm-hmm. we don't realize, but it's exhausting to do everything with such a short attention span, right? With mm-hmm. Again, Zoom meeting, checking an email, listening to this, the TV on, the cat or the dog is there, and the kids, and you're trying to pay attention at the same time that they're homeschooling while you're doing this Zoom conference. It's very complex. So focus becomes an issue. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that I would say. And then just be respectful of boundaries. Things get very much mixed up. What's your personal life anymore, or your work time, or are we? Mm-hmm. Where are those boundaries, right? Those boundaries just get completely diluted, and it's also an issue because when you feel completely exhausted, it's kind of late already. You're depleted of energy. So it's so important that you focus on the moment, you focus on what you're doing, and that you do one thing at a time, and that you really create intentional barriers. Now I'm working. Mm-hmm. Now I'm having fun. This is a time of leisure. Now I'm watching a movie on Netflix. But it's everything, mm-hmm. it's there, right? So I'm watching a movie on Netflix, and then my email goes ping, and I check the email. Mm-hmm. Why, right? But we used to do that before, but now it's completely exacerbated by the pandemic. So attention mm-hmm. and boundaries are two very important things. And then the third thing I would say it's important is just to flow, to let yourself be transformed by what's happening. Mm-hmm. Not to deny, well, nothing is happening. Yes, a lot is happening. Humanity is mm-hmm. being transformed right now. And deeply acknowledge that this is difficult, not just for you. Right? Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we tend to say, well, this is very difficult, and this is, I'm exhausted, and my boss this, or my kids that. But you're interacting in your job from your house with somebody that is going probably through something similar, if not more complex, maybe. So mm-hmm. that awareness of connection is also very important. So there's more that we can say about this, right? But really at work and working through the pandemic, these three things, really taking care of what's in front of you, one thing at a time, creating intentional boundaries, and deeply understanding that we are in this together. I would say those three things.
Uh-huh. And I wonder, I think it's related to that, like how we cultivate creativity. Because I think for creativity, we also need to be in this present moment, right?
We do. We definitely do. Yeah. And you know, I think so. And you know this as a designer, and you know this as an, especially as a designer, right? Where you in your work probably, and it happened to me in advertising, you're forced to be creative, right? It's not
Yeah,
like
it's so
you can be
hard.
creative tomorrow if you would like to. No, tomorrow is
No,
the product launch. Tomorrow is the book, right? So
yeah.
you need to be creative today, now. And how does that work? How do you spark creativity? And I would say those creative juices um, are usually fed or are created in our interaction with life. And now that we are so constrained, I find it very hard to be creative, and at the same time, sometimes very easy, right? Because I'm less distracted, so I can go deeper. But I think creativity right now is one of the most important energies that we can have. So your kids are homeschooling, and we only have one computer or one room or whatever. How can you be creative? You know, we've been eating the same dinner over and over again because we don't want to go to the store. How can you be creative? You know, so creativity beyond your job. I think creativity in regards to your life right now. It's one of the main things that make this moment in time livable and enjoyable, even beautiful. So creativity can make the pandemic beautiful.
That's true. And I feel that like when pandemic started and we started being quarantined, I felt that I was actually in a Zen retreat, and I felt like now everyone is in a sesshin.
Yeah.
Because I think what you're saying about creativity and how we are kind of constrained is also like similar when we are like doing a practice period, especially at the Sahara, that we have like very little free time. But also because we are so focused and we are having this kind of schedule and so much meditation, it also feels that there's some, I don't know, imagination and creativity available in this kind of constrained schedule. And
Yeah. Definitely. Pandemic has been and is a very long Zen retreat, as you say.
yes,
And the same as it, sometimes people might think of a Zen retreat like people who haven't done retreats, maybe people who have. Well, it's, you relax all the time and it's beautiful and the birds sing and, and wow, 7 days of just meditating. Yeah, right. Yeah. After the second day of being intimate with yourself and your body
wow,
starting to ache, you know very well how that feels. So a Zen retreat actually asks a lot of you, and so does this pandemic. But this pandemic, as a Zen retreat, if you are open to it, it's an amazing teacher. Pandemic can be an amazing teacher, but you need to be open to let yourself be taught. Right? Instead of hating what's happening, instead of being against what's happening, instead of trying not to connect with your reality of what's happening, just be with what's happening and let yourself be taught by what's happening. And then it's just another big opportunity to be transformed. And that's it. That's what it's all about, right? It's about being transformed into a better human being. So, and yes, I'm not saying that the pandemic is not difficult and it's so hard and people are dying. Of course, I'm not saying that's not true. Yet, the pandemic can be an amazing teacher if you let these particular circumstances in your life teach you. And that's true for the rest of your life, not just for the pandemic, right? But in particular, since we're talking about the pandemic, it can be a great teacher.
Yeah, and I think there's something about really accepting our feelings, because sometimes it's really hard actually. So many people are going through anxiety and depression, and I think everyone, at least have experienced like ups and downs, and sometimes you just realize how it's actually hard to be lonely, and so it is to be in the present moment, and sometimes it's really hard actually.
Oh yeah. Yes, and you know, there's all sorts of feelings and emotions that can happen. This is it's long. It's not just, you know, well, a couple of weeks. It's been 2 years. It's going to be, you know, this is long. This is deeply transformative. So all kinds of feelings probably have arisen to different people at different times. At least I know that that's true for me. The important thing, as you say, is to be there in connection with your feelings, and being there in connection with your feelings, your emotions, what the reality of what's happening is a real chance of being transformed, right? If you are in a denial kind of attitude, or you know, just hating what's happening and disengaging with what's happening, you might lose an important opportunity there. So yeah, definitely, it's an emotional time in our lives, and for some people, quite the contrary, because some people have just disengaged emotionally, right? And there's a balance. There's a balance between being completely emotional and you know, just being too into your emotions to a way where you're not functional, or completely disengaging from your emotions. And both ends, really, it's a missed opportunity, I think.
Yeah, and I imagine you, like, as the president of Zencounter. I mean, in all work actually, there's always a lot of like relationship between people. So it's not just kind of, even if we are just meeting in Zoom, it's really like relating to people and relating with a lot of people also going through this kind of ups and downs. And so, yeah, I wonder how was this to work with people and the relationship with them through these circumstances?
I don't think that we would have connected the way we are connected right now globally if it wasn't for the pandemic, right? Because yes, we had Zoom, we had Skype, but having a meeting on Zoom was, you know, very, you know, maybe somebody wasn't there, or was kind of not very common. But what this particular situation did, I feel, is it forced us to really connect through this media, right? And we found a way in which we can actually be there in a meeting, even though our bodies are not in the same room. Our hearts, our intention, our attention is. And that was completely not there before the pandemic, right? And now I'm having meetings, and I'm having maybe a practice discussion with a student, and yeah, of course, I'm not saying that being there in person doesn't have its own power, because it does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not what it was before when I had a Skype conversation, right? There is another intimacy that's being created. It's really intimate. And you have meetings with more than, a number of people on the screen, and it can get really, really deep, amazingly deep. And if you told me this story 2 years ago, I would say, nah, get out of here. No, things are in person, only in person. So my question right now is how those relationships will change with this combination of the death of in person, once we can be in person again, the death of in person, plus the continuity of the digital media. Because before it was just deep, right? We meet or we don't. Maybe we talk on the phone sometimes. But now there is this, right? There is this flow of space and time where we can actually be together at any time. Just press a button. And we are really together, I think. And then you can also, at some point, have the depth go deeper in that one-on-one or group physical meeting. So what's happening, honestly, I think it's wonderful. And again, I'm sounding too much like a pandemic optimistic. I'm not saying that this is great. But what I do want to say is there is a lot of greatness in what's happening. And you choose to see it.
Yeah, and I know that now you have your blog and site, and we're communicating to a lot of people. It's so nice to see that.
Yeah, and that was completely unthought before the pandemic, or at least I didn't see it, But the pandemic just drew people together from different places, and yeah, it's just happening.
It's beautiful to see how we're able to communicate to all these people and to bring the Dharma to them, and
it's a beautiful opportunity. And before in Getsu, I going back to that first story that I was telling around coming here to train, coming here, but one of the main things there and then is just being a bottleneck, right? It's just one sozan. And this one sozan can be on a plane and go to this place, and then be on a plane and go to this place. But that was the reality of teaching when there is few amount of teachers in places in Hispanic speaking America and in Europe. But suddenly something changed, right? I can actually engage with people through this media, really connecting, deeply connecting, and at the same time.
Ishi, I think you're gone. Diego, or it's me? Are you there? Can people hear me? Diego? Ishi. 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 He's gone. I will try to call him again. How do I do that? Susan?
I lost connection. Back. I lost connection. I'm back. Okay. But again, what I was saying, right? Being able to really connect through this media, the accessibility, the availability of this media, and then eventually the depth of being here or there in person, right? Marvelous combination. Completely new.
Nice. And I want to ask you something else, because I know you and Paula, and both of you practice together. You guys met practicing, right?
We did. Paula, my wife, and myself met in a Zendo in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, so
Zendo is a
how,
meditation hall, sorry, for people who don't know. A meditation place, yeah.
how is this to practice as a couple? How does the practice kind of permeate your relationship? And
Well, I think you use the correct word, right? Permeate. Practice permeates your relationship. Again, we go back to the practice not being a book on your bookshelf, but being the bookshelf, right? And then when we are immersed in a practice that fosters or really has a deep intention towards wisdom and compassion, then wisdom and compassion becomes part of your relationship. If it doesn't, then practice is not so much the bookshelf. It becomes a book, right? Now I'm practicing, now I'm engaging in my relationship with my partner. Not separate, not separate. And I think one of the things that really changed in me is to be more accepting of who we are, right? Not just seeing myself more a bit more clearly who I am, but seeing my wife as who she is, and really accepting that and loving that, instead of living a reality that's not, thinking all the times that things should be different, that your partner should be different, or according to your needs, or according to I think practice has helped me very much in seeing how in the reality of our relationship, my partner is perfect as she is. No, and then we work together. We work together in our differences. We work together in our expectations. We work together in and I think the other thing that really became important through my practice in my relationship is respect. Being really, really respectful of the person and of the person's reality and needs and whatever is happening. So when you deepen in your practice and you start having a teeny weeny sense that things are actually not separate, that everything is a dependent co-arising of things, you maybe have a chance to get a glimpse of how your marriage is dependently co-arising at the same time. There's a dependent co-arising of your marriage, your relationship, that you're really together in this. Even if you want to see it or not, you are together in this. And that's beautiful. Is it easy? No. Life is not easy.
Yeah.
Spiritual practice, whatever, not easy. Marriage, not easy.
Not.
Worthwhile? Definitely yes. Definitely.
Yeah, and you did that together, like leaving your home in Argentina, packing everything, going to San Francisco. And so you left home and you found home. And as a priest, we say that you left home. So what is home for you?
Well, my wife is listening, so I could say wherever she is. But I think that's very romantic. Home is wherever my wife is. But really, I'm not sure what home is anymore. I think I leave home all the time, and when you leave home all the time, home is there wherever you are, right? Wherever you are here and now is home, and and for some people that's something you share, right? And with Paula, we share that creating a home wherever we are, at the same time leaving home from the more in the more deeper sense, right? Because there is no home to leave, actually. That's my understanding of practice right now. There is no home to leave. And yeah, when you have somebody to share the practice with and be each other's mirror, and one of the good things about my partner, about Paula, is that she is ruthless with my humanity. She will tell me absolutely everything she sees from the point of view of what she sees, and say, did you see this, or did you see that, or I think you should, look at this. And oh my God, what a mirror my wife is. And it just once and again destroys my ego. It's one of the most sincere people I know in regards to me. She will not try to be something she's not, or try to convince me of something that she would just say things. And I try to be the same way, respectfully, of course. But there's so much growth in having an intimate mirror when you practice together. And I also have the same thing with my teacher, right? My teacher, which is your teacher.
Yes,
we have the same teacher. One of the things I really, really appreciate of my teacher is the way he's a mirror. And he would just tell me stuff, say, look at this. So that's something I value very much of my practice in relationship. That we practice together, and we can, yes, sometimes we discuss more, like something we read, or something somebody said in a Dharma talk. We do that, yes. But the real practice happens there, where we relate, and where we grow together and are transformed together, and mirror each other with love and respect. So I'm very, very fortunate.
And how do you see, because I know the same for me, like before going to Zencounter, we didn't have really a community life. And how do you see the importance of the community to the practice? And also, there are so many people also like looking to this kind of co-housing or co-living, kind of looking for ways to share life. And so how do you see also, how do you see the importance of living in community for practice? And how do you see all these initiatives of people living together for their lives, and how it can be helpful for them?
Let's see. There's some things, I think there's some things that people should really do in their lives. Right? See the ocean. I think everybody, I wish, of course that's not possible, but I wish that everybody had an opportunity in their lives to see the ocean. Something is transformed. Something changes when you see the ocean. The vast emptiness, and it's like, okay, wow, the ocean. And there are a number of things that I think it'd be ideal that people could, if they are so lucky, do in their lives. And one of them is living at least for a short period of time in community. Because it's a life changer. When you really support each other and live with each other in a way that that there is growth that happens beyond yourself as an individual, but it happens as a community. So having said that, there are different types of communities, right? And you know, it might be a community of motorcycle lovers that are living all together for a period of time and cycling together. That might be fantastic as well, right? Spiritual communities have that other aspect where there is an intentional, you know, spiritual component and learning, like we have here. But this is also uncommon. You know, San Francisco Zen Center usually has 180 residents living in community. That's not normal. That's one of the few places in the West where that happens. But going back to your question, I think living in community, and of course you can learn living in any community, but I want to add something. I think everybody should have ideally the chance to live for some time in a healthy community. And I want to make emphasis in healthy, right? So of course we have problems and trouble, and every community has its issues, and it's complex, and it's people living together. Yes, it's usually messy, but messy doesn't need to be not healthy, right? There's something that's holding the community together, that's powerful, that's noble, that's healthy. So I would recommend and I do recommend to any people I know, to find, if they can, a space. Maybe it's just 2 weeks, you know, just a vacation, but integrate yourself to a community that's already. If we're going to go all together in vacations for 2 weeks, me and my friends, that's not necessarily living in community. I can learn a lot, right? And living with my friends for 2 weeks in the same house, but that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about a community that's established, that has its own maturity as a community. And I would recommend, and I do recommend people, say, if you find that, try to spend some time, see what's transformed, because living in community is really, really transformative. Is it for all your life? Probably not. And for most people, it's not. You know, for some people it is. For some people, just they choose to live their whole lives in community, which is amazing. But I'm not saying that needs to be the case. But being exposed for some time to that dynamic for me has a richness beyond words, you know. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. And also the communities, I mean, the situation is a little bit different in Brazil than the United States, but something in common, that sometimes the Zen Buddhist communities are kind of just one kind of people, kind of elite, white people. And so how do you see this way of kind of reaching out? And I don't know how are things exactly now. I think with the online programs, I've seen that some things have changed a little bit or expand more at San Francisco Zen Center. But how do you see this? How Zen communities can actually be more available to people who usually don't have some success with that?
And as you said at the beginning of this question, it does change in different regions and different countries in the world, right? It really does. But one of the things that sometimes makes it very difficult is that, you know, to live in a community. So, well, you can go to 2 weeks to live in a community. Well, I need to work, right? Maybe. So I'm not in a place where I can not work for 2 weeks. So when will I do that? So it's difficult, you know. It's really it's a difficult question, because there is so much involved in this. So I think that making oneself available is not enough. You need to create the structure to be able to meet people where they are. Right? Well, I'm open. You can come if you want. You know, we are super open. You're not. You know, look at my reality of my life. How come you say you're open if it's actually not accessible for me? For many reasons. So changing the structure of what's being offered is really important, and it takes a lot of time. It does. It's hard. It's hard work. And then, you know, it has to do with many things. Because this is not just about gender or race, or, you know, it's also about suffering, right? Like, is it open to people who are in deep suffering, or do you need to be, you know, super healthy and whatnot to be accepted? So it is very, very complex. I think the positive thing here is that there's much more awareness of this. That we understood that being available doesn't mean not to put a key in our lock, right? Doesn't mean, well, my doors are open. Something needs to change from within in order for communities to be really, really accessible, and spiritual groups and Zen groups to be really, really accessible. And we need to work on it, definitely.
So let's see. I think we have kind of more like 5 minutes. So I would say, how do you see, I mean, the practice now, not only at Zencounter, but how do you see the practice? So we have more formal practice, like you are a priest, but also in your site you communicate in a way that is more like the way people live. That's my feeling. Our communication is less like just the priest, but just talking about people's life. And so how do you see the future of like Zen practice? Maybe it's too much of a broad question, but
no, it's a good question, I think. You know, one of the things, if not the main thing, that made me decide to live and study and practice here is the expression of practice of this particular place that comes from Suzuki Roshi, the founder, you know, which is warm heart to warm heart. And that was a game changer for me. A practice in which we can really engage, meeting each other where we are, with warmth, with closeness. Of course, with, you know, other things that make up practice, like self-discipline and whatnot. Yes, of course, that's part of it. But that doesn't need to be cold and kind of martial, like, you know, like some kind of martial art. And I think, you know, this practice came from Japan, which in turn came from China before that. We are a different culture, right? And especially us as, you know, Hispanics are even, you know, it has another aspect of our way of connecting. So I'm very, very optimistic about the future of Zen practice, specifically the way I understand Zen practice today, which is togetherness, which is being enlightened as an expression of relationship, not as an expression of isolation. And not just that I think that understanding that enlightenment is something that happens in a relational level is what needs to happen to stop the difficulties we're creating to this world. So I am an optimistic around our practice, and how much it has to offer, because at the end of the day is deep wisdom and radical compassion, and that I feel is what the world needs right now. So on my end, I'll do whatever I can to keep practicing and keep sharing this and keep working together. So I'm very deeply grateful for this practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angetsu.
Yeah, I think I think it may kind of end soon. So I want to really thank you for your time. I know you're really busy. So thanks for taking the time to talk to me and to us. And thank you for your practice and your devotion to Zen and Suzuki Roshi lineage. And I hope we meet soon.
Thank you, Angetsu. Thank you for the invitation to have this dialogue together. I really like practicing with you, and yeah, accessibility of this. Here we are talking, and maybe the depth of seeing each other in person soon.
Yeah.
Maybe it's so.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone who came here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.